Children go through different developmental processes such as cognitive development, value development, and psychosocial development. In this session, we are going to discuss the psychosocial development. We will be basing our discussion on Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. Erikson has described personality development in 8 stages. He has called each period as a crisis in life. He also talks about through each stage the individual goes through a psychological crisis. From each stage, when one moves to the next stage, if the individual is able to resolve the crisis of the earlier stage, then a healthy individual is developed. This process continues. Now let us see that which are those 8 stages Erikson has described. So we will base our discussion on these 8 stages. We will also be using James Marcia's identity status theory to explain the 5th stage further. So let us see the 8 different stages of personality development or the crisis period. The first stage, stage 1, which is trust versus mistrust, which according to Erikson happens from birth to 2 years. The second stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt from 2 to 3 years. Stage 3, initiative versus guilt, age 3 to 6 years. Stage 4, industry versus inferiority, age 6 to 12 years. 5th stage, identity versus role confusion, 13 to 18 years. Then comes intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, then integrity versus despair. After the 5th stage, that means after 18 years, or till then, children are in school. So beyond the 5th stage, usually children leave school and they are either in colleges and universities or they take up any life related activity for a livelihood. We will be discussing the first 5 stages in detail. Let's see the first stage, which is trust versus mistrust, which is from birth to 2 years. We know that children in this age, they depend quite a lot on others, adults around them. So their dependency needs are very high during these years. So children whose dependency needs in early infancy are not met show general mistrust towards others, like teachers, peer group, in their later stages of life. Children who have developed a sense of trust generalize it to new situations in life. So this is the first stage wherein the child goes through a psychological crisis. So if the caregiver actually, if the caregiving pattern is healthy, then the child seems to develop trust. Otherwise, the child may develop mistrust, and this is not stopped at this stage itself. It is carried over to the later stages in life. So the dependency needs, if they are not met, then the child may develop mistrust. So that is carried over to the later stages of life. So children who have developed a sense of trust generalize into new situations in life. If they could actually resolve the crisis in that particular stage, then they develop as healthy human beings, because they can generalize the trust they felt, experienced during this stage into the later stages of their life. Stage 2 is autonomy versus shame and doubt, which is from age 2 to 3 years. If we observe children, we know that children by this time or this stage in their life, they can walk, run, they can do quite a bit of things by themselves. They are not as helpless as they were in the in stage 1, where they had more dependency needs. Now children are able to do quite a lot of things by themselves. So what are the characteristics of this period, or what kind of a crisis children go through in this stage? This particular stage is characterized by freedom and restraint. So therefore you would see that freedom and restraint are in play during this period. What do we mean by that? Freedom and restraint. For example, a 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old will love to run around the house, pull out things, throw those things around. So that is freedom. The child is enjoying a new given freedom, because the child is able to walk and run. So therefore the child uses its freedom to do different things. And if a freedom is not given, then they cannot develop autonomy. But if too much freedom is given, then what happens? So that will be a lot of indulgence. So let's see what are the other characteristics during this period. The feeling of independence is the positive aspect of this stage, but there can be negative emotional development too. How? How do they gain this feeling of independence? Because see, now their motor abilities are better compared to the first stage, so they can run around, walk around. So as I said earlier, they might like to pull out things and then throw it away. So that is a feeling of independence, which gives them quite a lot of a positive emotions like. But there can be negative emotional development too, because if there is a lot of restraint, then that can do the opposite effect, meaning negative emotional development. Because if you scold the child very harshly about the child's independence, like pulling out things and throwing it away, destroying things, so the child may take it in a negative fashion, and that might result in negative emotional development. So therefore there is a tussle between the child's sense of autonomy and sense of self-control at this stage. So if too much freedom is given, children may develop into self-indulging individuals. And if there is too much restraint, then they may develop a sense of shame and doubt. They will not be able to trust their own ability. So that is why he has called it a period of autonomy versus shame and doubt. For example, if children are given very harsh toilet training during this period, that may develop a kind of a negative emotional feelings in them. So the child is always in a tussle between his or her sense of autonomy and sense of self-control. So if the child is restrained so much, or then the child may not be able to believe or trust in his or her own abilities. At the same time, if the child is given quite a lot of freedom, quite a lot of autonomy, without any sense of self-control, in later stages in life, it may get reflected as a very self-indulging individual, or one who cannot exercise self-control in different situations. So these are the crises children go through in stage 2, that is autonomy versus shame and doubt. So what is a stage 3? Stage 3 is initiative versus guilt. This lasts for about 3 years, that is from the age 3 to 6. In this period, there is an increased desire to explore new environment and investigate new challenges. They become very inquisitive about their surroundings and ask many questions, sometimes very uncomfortable questions too. So usually adults around may not entertain many of the questions. Then what happens to their development? Children discouraged from taking up the initiative, the child would develop a sense of guilt about his or her tendency to explore and investigate. If you see, it is closely related to the previous stage, that is stage 2, wherein the child develops a kind of a shame and doubt if the child is restrained too much. In stage 3, when children show an increased desire to explore new environment and investigate new challenges, if they are not allowed to do so, then they may develop a sense of guilt, because they probably get the message that what they are doing is not right. So that may tend to, or that may lead to, develop a sense of guilt in children. So what the adults can do during this period, or what parents and teachers can do, because by and large during this period children find themselves in schools. So therefore parents and teachers together will have to work out what they can do for children during this period, so that they develop that sense of initiativeness rather than sense of guilt. Because if they are not allowed to take initiatives into new then their development is actually it is not allowed to see the full dimensions. They are stopped somewhere. So therefore, instead of taking initiatives and facing new challenges in later life, they might develop a sense of guilt. So they may not be able to do well in the later stages in their life. The fourth stage is industry versus inferiority. This stage lasts from age 6 to age 12. During this stage or in this stage, children attempt to achieve mastery in whatever they do. Children want to succeed in what they do. That is why we use the term industry. Children like to get into new activities and they like to achieve new mastery in this period. For example, like they would like to learn cycling, horse riding, or picking up any new skills, or the skills like which they have learned in schools, like reading. Initially, to begin with, the reading skill may be related only to the curriculum, and as they progress, they would like to read comics away from school, or what is not within the school curriculum. They might pick up comic books, they like to read it. So they like to get into new activities and they attempt to achieve mastery in whatever they do. Like they might like to take up swimming or riding or learning new skills, say playing tabla, and whatever they do, they want to succeed. So in this stage, if they are not encouraged to do things which they want to do, what happens? They develop a sense of inferiority. Once they develop a sense of inferiority, then what happens? They may then hesitate to take up new activities in later stages of their life, because they are unable to resolve the crisis in this particular stage. So you can see the association from stage 1 to stage 2, 3 and 4. Because unless the child is able to resolve the issues and crises in a particular stage, that gets carried over to the next stage. Because in this stage we have seen that through researches it has been shown that if children don't get reinforcement or encouragement for what they do, either from teachers or parents or peer groups, that a sense of inferiority is carried over to the later stages in life, and they may not develop into a healthy individual. So therefore, their attempt to achieve mastery in new things, that has to be encouraged or reinforced by, because they need acceptance at this stage. That has to be reinforced and encouraged by teachers, parents and peer groups. In the absence of such encouragement, or if the child is discouraged, the child may develop a sense of inferiority, which is inferiority complex they will carry over to the next stages of their life, which will negatively affect their the later activities of their life. So this is the fourth stage, industry versus inferiority. We will go to the fifth stage, that is identity versus role confusion. This is the adolescent period, which we describe as the period of storm and stress. From age 13 to 18, what kind of psychological crisis children go through? See, they are looking for answers like answers to questions like, who am I? They want to find the answer to the question, who am I? They are confused about their identity and role in the society. They experiment with new ideas and relationships. They are not sure about their attitudes, beliefs, and values. Actually, they are unable to take a decision. Most of them. They are confused. They don't know which decision to take. If you see this during this period, as they complete class 10 or class 12, then they are expected to take a decision about their future course of life, which academic stream they would follow, what academic program they will join. Those who can resolve these issues, they do well later on. Those who cannot resolve these issues, they will carry on this confusion in their later stages of life. During this stage, we also notice that many children are unable to take a decision about their career. Erikson calls it as psychosocial moratorium. They are confused, they are unable to make a decision. This is also the time they have some people as their role model. Like, for example, they would some of them may have film stars as their role model. So they would like to dress like them, walk like them, talk like them. And sometimes teachers or parents may be the role model. So many a times, therefore, they just follow the role model, not knowing whether this is what they want about life. So most of them remain in a psychosocial moratorium according to Erikson. That is because of their inability to arrive at a decision. They imitate so much so in this stage, they will just agree to whatever the role model says. Now, this particular stage, James Marcia has further researched in this area and has developed a theory which is known as identity status theory. Let us say that according to James Marcia, what are the explanations for this particular stage in a child's life? James Marcia's identity status theory is describes 4 primary ways in which adolescents try to resolve the crisis of identity. Identity diffusion, identity foreclosure, identity moratorium, and identity achievement. So these are the four primary ways in which, according to Marcia, adolescents resolve the crisis of identity. Let's see in detail what is the four different ways of dealing with the crisis of identity. What is identity diffusion? Marcia says this is a situation in which the adolescent has not made any firm commitments to any ideology, occupation or interpersonal relationship and is not currently thinking about such commitments. It is just as Erikson said, they are unable to make commitments, although they keep on experimenting with new ideas and relationships, but they are unable to make commitments at this stage. So some children therefore will take this as a way to resolve their crisis of identity. They will not arrive at any decision. They will not make any commitment. So they remain in an identity diffusion. Next we will see identity foreclosure. Identity foreclosure, in which the adolescent attempts to resolve the identity crisis by accepting the role authority figures and friends choose for him or her. Because this is very common among them. They will have some authority figure as their role model or some film stars, and they are also quite a lot of they get influenced by the peer group. So if they are unable to make a decision, then they try to resolve the crisis through or by accepting the role authority figures and friends choose for him. Suppose parents tell the child, follow a particular path. For example, join engineering program or join medical sciences. So they just follow that. Or from the peer group, if somebody is joining a medical program, then would persuade another child, you join with me in the medical program. So this is one way of resolving the crisis, identity foreclosure. They don't take a decision by themselves. The decision is taken for them. The decision is taken on their behalf by somebody else, like a parent, a teacher, or somebody from the peer group. The third way of resolving the identity crisis is identity moratorium. The adolescent considers alternative choices and experiences different roles, but final decisions are not made. Meaning, just as Erikson said, they remain in a psychosocial moratorium. Here, Marcia also comes to the conclusion that this is the adolescents' one of their four ways of resolving the crisis of identity. They remain in an identity moratorium because they don't make any final decision. Now the fourth way of resolving the crisis of identity is identity achievement. In this identity achievement is the adolescent develops a sense of commitment to life choices. So herein actually the adolescent is able to come to a decision, come to making a commitment. That means the adolescent is able to resolve the crisis of identity. So if this is achieved, it is fine. Because here the decision is made by the adolescent himself or herself, which means the crisis, the psychological crisis the adolescent was going through this stage is resolved. There is no issue carried over to the next stages in life. Unlike the first one, which is identity diffusion, okay, in identity diffusion we have seen that is a situation in which the adolescent has not made any firm commitments to any ideology, occupation or interpersonal relationship and is not currently thinking about such commitments, meaning they are unable to make a commitment, they are unable to choose an ideology. Look at identity achievement. So this is in this way, when the adolescent is dealing with the situation, that means the adolescent has actually resolved the crisis. Whereas in identity diffusion, the adolescent was unable to resolve the crisis. So when they are unable to resolve the crisis, they may develop a negative identity that is opposite to the values and culture they were brought up with. These are some of the chances Marcia explains. There is also a chance that adolescents with a negative identity may enter into antisocial activities and crime. Meaning, if the adolescent is unable to resolve the crisis of identity in this stage, it may have a negative impact on the adolescent's later life. So the four different ways in which adolescents try to resolve the crisis of identity according to Marcia is identity diffusion, identity foreclosure, identity moratorium and identity achievement. So this is in fact a further explanation or rather Marcia has elaborated on stage 5 of Erikson's psychosocial development theory, which is identity versus role confusion. Now the 6th, 7th and 8th stages of a psychosocial development or the personality development of a child, which is beyond the schooling age. The 6th stage is intimacy versus isolation. In this stage, the major crisis is the development of a true and intimate relationship. Erikson thought that those who fail to experience this intimacy will develop a sense of isolation and tend to avoid relationships and make commitments. So if they are unable to resolve the crisis in this period, they may not be successful in relationships and they may shy away from commitments. In stage 7, which is generativity versus stagnation, individuals in middle age develop a sense of generativity which Erikson defined as creativity or productivity. Otherwise, they experience stagnation. So we have seen many people in their middle age doing rather well. And if you don't do that, then obviously the other side is stagnation. Therefore, generativity versus stagnation. In the last stage of a psychosocial development, integrity versus despair. Those who have adapted to the ups and downs of life develop a sense of satisfaction and acceptance. Meaning, they are content about their life. And if that doesn't happen, what follows? Healthy resolutions in early stages of crisis develop a sense of integrity, and unhealthy resolutions lead to despair. So, in the earlier stages, if the crisis was resolved in a healthy fashion, then in the final or the last 8th stage, they experience a sense of integrity. And if they could not resolve the crisis in earlier stages, then that leads to despair, because they could not take healthy resolutions. So unhealthy resolutions lead to despair. So in this session, we have discussed the psychosocial development. Our discussion was based on Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. We have discussed 5 different stages of psychosocial development in detail, and we have also discussed the last 3 stages, which is beyond the schooling age, and we have used James Marcia's identity status theory to further describe the 5th stage of psychosocial development, that is the identity versus role confusion, wherein James Marcia describes the 4 primary ways in which the adolescents try to resolve the crisis of identity in their life, which are identity diffusion, identity foreclosure, identity moratorium, and identity achievement. Thank you very much.